think back to your childhood. Chances are, even if you're a 90s or early 2000s kid, you'd have played a remaster or a remake in some shape or form. It's not a modern video game trend. To say modern gaming is creatively bankrupt is disingenuous at best. With that out of the way, let's get into some games I think are deserving of remakes and remasters. Lunar, the Silver Star, and Lunar 2, Eternal Blue are two of the most beloved JRPGs of all time. The first game was initially released on the Sega CD and then later ported with more content to the PS1. Its second remake was Lunar Legend for the Game Boy Advance. Its final release was on the PSP with Lunar Silver Star Harmony. Lunar 2 was initially released on the Sega CD and was later remade for the PS1. Since then, it hasn't gotten further ports. If you look on eBay, that port is obscenely expensive. The cheapest copy I could find was 115 Canadian plus an additional $30 shipping. Most copies are in the $200 plus range. Beyond the cost factor, a remake of Lunar 1 and 2 would be great right now because the trend of 2D sprites are becoming more popular. Plus, the series was always known for amazing sound design. Just imagine what could be accomplished if this game came out on the PS5, which uses the custom Tempest engine sound chip. The developers could really push the boundaries of sound design. For those not in the know, Lunar as a series is a turn-based game that gives you a side-on view of the battlefield and lets you move your party closer or further away from the enemy. It's simple game design by today's standards, but the depth comes from knowing when to use what moves in what situations and playing smart. However, where the Lunar franchise has always shone brightest is in its storyline and in its lore. Basically a game right up my alleyway and one of the first non-Pokemon JRPGs I ever played. Because people won't have an easy time experiencing Lunar 2 outside of emulation, and because PSP games are also getting more expensive, these two games are very deserving of, at minimum, remasters. So why am I suggesting these games as a combo pack over both games getting separate releases? This is partially because the Lunar games are so interconnected it'd be a hard package to sell individually, and it'd look a little odd giving Lunar 1 a fourth standalone remake. This would also be a better value proposition for potential buyers. Also, you pretty much need Lunar 1 available on modern hardware if you want to sell Lunar 2, as that game's a harder one to digest if the first game isn't also available. The Legend of Dragoon is another JRPG, one that developed a massive albeit cult following among PlayStation aficionados. This very vocal fanbase has been clamoring for Sony to remake or remaster this game properly since the PS3 era. On the PlayStation 3 storefront, you can still purchase that version of the game. However, it's not a proper remaster, and for all we know, Sony may decide to shut down the PS3 store and the PS Vita store in the near future, making the future of that port in question. So obviously, if you want to play The Legend of Dragoon, your options are limited to either buying a physical PS1 CD or buying it digitally either on PS3 or Vita. The physical route is potentially expensive in this instance. However, not all hope is lost for this game coming out on modern hardware. Rumors indicate the game might come to the PlayStation Plus collection of games. Also, fans have been demanding a remake for a very long time. If Sony did decide to remake this game, it'd be a standout in the current PlayStation library because there aren't very many turn-based JRPGs on the market that are worth a damn, much less ones that are first-party. Nintendo does have a few, and Nihon Falcom has the Legend of Heroes series, but dedicated turn-based RPGs with decent-sized budgets are few and far between. This game also features a system where you can hit a specific button for extra damage or effects, meaning it will have some appeal to the button-mashing crowd as well. The story and lore for this game are also quite good, meaning Sony's more cinematic storytelling could do wonders for this title. I don't have high hopes that this one will get the remake treatment it deserves, but if it happens, I'd definitely be first in line to pick it up. You knew I had to include a fighting game on this list. Also, Team Ninja have sort of done this in the past with Dead or Alive Dimensions. Now, I'm not going to dunk on DOA Dimensions, but, well, let's just say fighting games on the DS feel brutal to play. For those that don't know, Dead or Alive Dimensions is a retelling of the first 4 games. Also, those on Xbox Series consoles are exceptionally lucky, as every single Dead or Alive game released on Xbox through Xbox 360 is backwards compatible on the Series version of consoles. In this instance, I'm not expecting ground-up remakes, just port it over to PlayStation, Switch, and PC, and call it a day. Ah yes, Folklore. This game was a special release to me. It came out in the early days of the PS3, October of 2007 to be exact. This game blew me away when I popped it into my system. It was a nice game to look at graphically. Has it aged well in this department? Sort of. If you told me it was an upcoming indie title, I'd believe you. But for the PS3, it was a rather pretty game. It also was one of the very few games I feel made good use of the 6-axis controller, so I feel Folklore could be elevated with the implementation of haptic feedback and adaptive triggers found in the DualSense. It could also be a visual spectacle on the PS5. Part of the game's charm comes from how the story is presented to players. Gex is one of those platforming mascots from the late 90s that time has seemingly forgot. I had the first Gex game on the PS1, the 2D one in fact. Gex had 2 further sequels, however, they were 3D games. However, Gex was massively different from the other mascot platformers at the time. Mario, Crash, Sonic, and Spyro were all really kid-friendly platformers. Gex, on the other hand, was a little on the crass side and crammed full of pop culture references. If this sounds familiar, it should, as Rare's Conker's Bad Fur Day did a similar thing a full 6 years later. But it was far crasser and much more adult in tone. While Gex was simple in terms of mechanics, it was a lot of fun, and it had a unique selling point in being a bit edgy for younger players, but just juvenile enough that adolescences and younger teens would appreciate the pop culture references. Honestly, Gex could come back in this form and do pretty well. Just update the pop culture references to be more modern and lean into some of the more unique features of a Gecko, and you'll have a platformer that stands out in the modern market. Then again, platformers have become incredibly niche in recent years, with only Metroidvanias finding success. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1st through 3rd chapters are widely considered some of the best JRPGs of all time. It's not just Falcom diehards who think this though, a lot of JRPG fanatics love these games as well. It's not hard to see why. Memorable characters, good gameplay, amazing lore, and a really good storyline. We know that Falcom plans on making their games more readily available to more players on modern hardware. If you want to do so with the Sky games, you're basically down to just using a PC. Honestly, I'd be happy with mere ports to newer systems. These games don't require ground-up remakes, and there's a certain charm to the sprite art from these 3 titles. Skies of Arcadia is a JRPG that simply passed me by. I was 10 years old when it released, and I had no interest in the Sega Dreamcast because I really hated its controller, and I was well entrenched in the PlayStation ecosystem by this point in time. Also, to be honest, RPGs were just not my thing back then. I was super into platformers and sports games at the time. The only RPG that interested me at this point in time was Pokemon. By the time I'd heard of this venerable gem of a JRPG, we were already 2 years into the PS3's lifecycle. When I played Valkyria Chronicles, I fell in love with Vice and Fina as they just stood out from the other characters. As I got more into RPGs in my 20s, I always thought, damn, I want to play Skies of Arcadia. I still haven't had that chance, and honestly, this is what remasters and remakes are intended for. Games that need a second lease on life, or in this game's case, a third. You see, Skies of Arcadia originally released for the Dreamcast in the year 2000, however, given the fact the Dreamcast was dead by 2001, Sega needed to release its recent-ish games on other hardware. So in late 2002 and early 2003, Skies of Arcadia got a port to the Nintendo GameCube. Across 2 systems, Skies of Arcadia sold a middling 310,000 copies over its lifetime. Not great numbers for the time, however, over the last 2 decades, this game has gained cult status, meaning there's a ton of people who'd be interested in giving it a try. Those are just some of the games I want to see get remakes, remasters, or re-releases. What are some games you'd like to see get one of these treatments, though? Comment below. Also, right about now, 2 of my previous videos should be popping up on screen, one that YouTube thinks you'll like, and my previous video. Also, if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to check out my Twitch channel or my social media accounts. Links will be in the description.